Captain Leora Venn had two settings, bored and pissed. Right now, she was leaning hard on the latter. The endurance. Rylan Vex stood near the back, clutching his datapad like a lifeline. Not that anyone noticed him, not yet. The room was filled with alien diplomats whose faces looked like they'd been carved by a committee of pissed-off sculptors. There were three-eyed blobs from the BVLVNN collective, antennae-waving skeptocs, and the ever-charming, needle-toothed diplomats from Zorbal. The tension was thick enough to choke a space whale, and that was saying something. Rylan had dealt with space whales. They're not nearly as friendly as those old Earth documentaries made them out to be, especially the part where their stomachs are full of starship parts. We convened today to discuss the findings at Site Theta 12, droned one of the BVLVNN, its mouth flaps moving in disconcerting rhythm. It was like watching a clam try its hand at public speaking. The artifacts discovered could be a weapon of unimaginable power, it continued, as if anyone needed more motivation to panic. Rylan snorted quietly. A weapon, sure, and maybe the skeletons of the long-dead civilization would rise and sing show tunes too. Honestly, the galaxy had more pressing problems, like why every interstellar snack tasted like cardboard. As the aliens bickered over protocols and ownership, because of course, everyone wanted a piece of the pie even if it might explode in their faces, Rylan's moment arrived. An old skeptoc, its skin a revolting shade of puce, pointed one of its many fingers at him. Engineer Rylan Vex, human representative. He felt 1,000 eyes or equivalent sensory organs turn his way. "Ah, yes," Rylan said, trying not to sound like a guy who wished he was anywhere else. "Rylan Vex at your service. Just a humble engineer. You will be responsible for deciphering these ancient remnants," the skeptoc continued, its tone suggesting it would rather set itself on fire. "Though I suspect your species' capabilities are limited." A ripple of what could only be alien laughter spread through the chamber, though it mostly sounded like a symphony of malfunctioning airlocks. Rylan gave them his best grin, the kind that had gotten him out of a few bar fights and into a few others. "Oh, don't underestimate human ingenuity," he said. "We've come a long way since banging rocks together. Now we have power tools." There was a murmur of discontent, which in an interspecies council was about as common as space dust. Rylan knew better than to take it personally. If he had a credit for every time someone doubted him, well, he'd still be working this job because the currency exchange between planets was a nightmare. The skeptoc waved a hand dismissively. "You will have access to the site and all relevant data, but remember, failure is not an option." "Sure it is," Rylan replied, deadpan. "It's just not a very good one." The glare he received could have melted titanium. He decided it was probably best to stop poking the metaphorical hornet's nest. Besides, he had bigger things to worry about, like figuring out what ancient alien artifacts did before they decided to go boom. Rylan was escorted out, the conversation behind him dissolving back into a cacophony of arguments. Outside the chamber, a lean, rust-colored android named K7-Zip awaited him. Zip had been his assistant for years, which meant it had saved his ass more times than he cared to admit. "How'd it go?" Zip asked, its voice a smooth monotone that always seemed on the verge of sarcasm. "Great," Rylan said, rolling his eyes. "They only mildly threatened me this time. We're making progress." Zip made a noise that was supposed to approximate amusement. "So what's next?" "Next, we poke around an old graveyard and hope we don't wake the dead," he replied, striding toward his ship. "Or worse, trip on something that'll vaporize us." "Sounds like a typical Tuesday," Zip observed, following closely behind. They arrived at the hangar, a vast space filled with ships of every conceivable design, from sleek cruisers to hulking freighters that looked like they'd been assembled by committee. Rylan's ship, the Lucky Bastard, was parked near the back. It was an old model, patched with more love than skill, but it flew, and in their line of work that was often enough. "Think the Bastard is up for another adventure?" Zip asked, tilting its head toward the ship. Rylan shrugged, tapping the panel to lower the ramp. If she isn't, we're really going to find out what those artifacts do. They boarded the ship, Rylan slumping into the worn pilot's chair while Zip took its place at the navigation console. The engines hummed to life with the enthusiasm of a creature waking from a long nap. "Coordinates are set for Theta 12, Zip announced. "Ready when you are." Rylan took a deep breath. "Let's hope this isn't a one-way trip," he muttered, engaging the thrusters. "I haven't finished paying off the bastard yet." They lifted off, the view of the council station shrinking into the vastness of space. Rylan couldn't help but smirk. There was something oddly comforting about the cold void, where at least the stars stayed put and didn't ask stupid questions. As they jumped to hyperspace, Rylan leaned back, trying to ignore the gnawing unease in his gut. The galaxy was a dangerous place, more so when ancient mysteries were involved. But he dealt with worse, and he wasn't alone. "You worried about this one, Rylan?" Zip asked, breaking the silence. "Worried me? Nah," Rylan replied. "Just cautiously pessimistic." "That's the spirit," Zip said, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the cockpit. "We'll figure it out or die trying." Rylan chuckled. "You know, Zip, sometimes I think you're rubbing off on me." "Perish the thought," Zip replied dryly. As they sped toward their unknown destiny, Rylan couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement mingled with dread. The universe was full of surprises, most of them unpleasant, but maybe, just maybe, this time they'd get lucky. The lucky bastard dropped out of hyperspace above Theta 12. The planet was a dull, brownish sphere, orbiting a sun that looked as tired as Rylan felt. Ancient ruins dotted the surface like acne scars on a teenager's face. "Charming," Rylan muttered, bringing the ship in for a landing. "I can see why everyone's fighting over this prime piece of real estate." Zip scanned the readings. "Atmosphere's breathable if you enjoy the scent of sulfur and despair." "Good thing I'm not picky," Rylan said, guiding the bastard into a clearing. The landing was smooth, which was more than he could say for most of his previous attempts. They disembarked, the ground crunching beneath their boots or treads in Zip's case. The ruins loomed ahead, ancient structures that looked like they'd been designed by someone with a fondness for sharp angles and ominous shadows. "Let's see what all the fuss is about," Rylan said, heading toward the entrance. "And try not to touch anything that looks like it might explode." "Acknowledged," Zip replied, its sensors whirring softly. They stepped inside, darkness swallowing them whole. The air was thick with dust and the echoes of a long-dead civilization. Rylan flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom like a knife. He approached the central chamber where the alleged weapon, if it was a weapon, was supposed to be. Instead, he found a series of intricate carvings and symbols etched into the stone, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. "Well, this is underwhelming," he said, squinting at the alien script. "Zip, any idea what we're looking at?" Zip scanned the symbols, its processors humming. "This language predates known records. Translation will be challenging." "Great," Rylan sighed. "So we're staring at ancient graffiti." As they surveyed the chamber, a low rumble echoed through the ruins, the floor vibrating beneath their feet. Rylan's heart skipped a beat. Was that you?" "Not unless I've developed seismic capabilities," Zip replied. The rumbling intensified, dust falling from the ceiling like a gritty rain. Rylan's instincts screamed at him to move fast. "Let's get the hell out of here," he shouted, making a beeline for the exit. They sprinted down the corridor, the rumbling growing louder. It felt like the planet itself was waking up, and it wasn't happy about it. They burst into the open air just as the ground heaved, the entrance collapsing behind them with a deafening crash. Rylan stumbled away, cursing the universe and its twisted sense of humor. "Well," he panted, hands on his knees, "that could have gone better. At least we're still in one piece," Zip noted. Rylan straightened, scanning the barren landscape. "Yeah, but for how long?" "Something tells me this job just got a lot more complicated." He glanced at Zip, who nodded in agreement. They were in deep, and the only way out was through. As they returned to the lucky bastard, Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just scratched the surface of something far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. "Ready for round two?" he asked as they boarded the ship. "Always," Zip replied, already preparing the engines for takeoff. Rylan took the pilot's seat, determination settling in his bones. Whatever lay ahead, he'd face it head-on. That's the thing about humans, stubbornness was practically their superpower. Rylan Vex, engineer extraordinaire, or at least that's what he told himself in the mirror each morning, found himself staring at a heap of ancient alien debris that looked about as useful as a broken toaster. Not that anyone toasted bread in space. The council chamber's aroma of burnt rubber and despair was a distant memory, replaced by the sweet, sweet scent of dashed hopes and historical junk. "So this is what all the fuss is about," Rylan muttered, kicking a rock that skittered across the dusty floor like a discontented beetle. "I've seen more impressive displays at a garage sale." Zip, his trusty android assistant, scanned the piles of alien detritus. "It appears these artifacts are, in technical terms, crap," Rylan snorted. Good to know even ancient aliens had their off days. Despite the apparent uselessness of the site, Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The carvings they'd seen before the grand collapse still lingered in his mind like a bad song. Symbols that didn't make sense, like a puzzle missing its edges. He rubbed his chin, thinking, "You know, if this really is just junk, why's everyone so worked up?" Zip's voice droned with its usual dry tone. "Possibly because hope is a universal trait, or stupidity, often hard to tell the difference." Ryland sighed. He'd dealt with bureaucratic nightmares before, but alien politics were a whole different beast. Speaking of which, the council chamber was likely a cauldron of simmering rivalries, with everyone wanting a piece of the cosmic pie, or at least the crumbs. Back at the council chamber, the Skeptok diplomat was in fine form, gesticulating with all the grace of a puppet on caffeine. "The Skeptok Collective has a rightful claim to Site Theta 12. It is within our sector," the BVLVNN diplomat, whose mouth flaps were working overtime, countered with a voice like a wet accordion. "Our historical records indicate otherwise. This site bears the hallmarks of BVLVNN architecture." The Zorbal diplomats, a trio of needle-toothed charmers, hissed in unison. "All false claims. The site is Zorbal territory by right of discovery." Rylan imagined this debate playing out for Iors like some intergalactic soap opera. "At least the snacks are better than human ones," he muttered, remembering his brief experience with their cuisine. Alien snacks were always a gamble, could be delicious, could dissolve your tongue. "How long do you think until they break out the fisticuffs?" Rylan asked Zip, who was still analyzing an artifact that vaguely resembled a melted lawn ornament. "If their history is any indication, approximately 13 minutes, Zip replied. "Give or take for dramatic speeches." Rylan chuckled, his mood lifted by the absurdity of it all. It was easy to laugh when you weren't the one being yelled at. Well, at least not today. The thought of being back in that chamber, 1,000 alien eyes scrutinizing his every move, made him grateful for the relative solitude of the rubble. But there was still work to be done, and Rylan was nothing if not stubborn. "Let's take another look around," he suggested, more to himself than to Zip. "Maybe we're just not seeing the forest for the trees, or the junk for the treasure," Zip added helpfully. They wandered deeper into the ruins, the air heavy with dust and regret. Rylan's mind buzzed with possibilities. Maybe there was something they'd missed, something hiding in plain sight. He'd seen it before in salvage operations. The most innocuous piece of scrap could hide wonders if you knew where to look. "Rylan," Zip said, pausing, its sensors pinging softly. "I've detected an energy signature beneath the surface." Rylan perked up, drawn by the promise of mystery like a moth to a flame that might also explode. "Where?" Zip pointed to a corner of the chamber that looked as promising as a politician's promise. "Approximately 10 meters below. The signature is weak but consistent." Rylan's heart rate kicked up a notch. Well, well, well. Maybe this trip won't be a total waste after all." He dropped to his knees, brushing aside layers of dust and debris until his fingers found the edge of a panel. With a grunt, he pried it open, revealing a narrow shaft that descended into darkness. "Shall we?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant but failing miserably. "Descending into unknown depths." "Truly our favorite pastime," Zip remarked dryly. They squeezed into the shaft, Rylan cursing under his breath as he navigated the tight confines. It was dark and musty, reminding him of every ill-advised spelunking trip he'd taken on a dare. Zip, of course, had no such qualms, its sensors probing the void ahead. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a hidden chamber, the air cooler and almost alive. Rylan flicked on his flashlight, the beam revealing walls lined with intricate circuitry that hummed with a faint, expectant energy. "Now we're talking," Rylan said, admiring the craftsmanship. "This is definitely not junk." Zip scanned the room, zeroing in on a central console that pulsed with a weak, steady glow. "This interface appears to control the main system." Rylan approached the console, his fingertips hovering just above its surface. Whatever this was, it felt powerful, like standing at the edge of a storm. He glanced at Zip. "Any ideas? If I had to guess, this could be a data center or a coffee maker. Sometimes hard to tell." Rylan smirked, his fingers brushing the console. The effect was immediate, a surge of energy, the room flickering to life as dormant systems awoke. Symbols and equations danced across the walls, an elaborate ballet of knowledge and power. "Looks like our little site just got a lot more interesting," Rylan said, wonder mixed with a healthy dose of apprehension. "Indeed," Zip concurred, "although we must proceed with caution. We wouldn't want to accidentally trigger a catastrophic event." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "In my experience, catastrophic events have a way of triggering themselves." Back at the council, the shouting match had escalated into what could only be described as a diplomatic free-for-all. The BVLVNN diplomat was accusing the Zorbal of cultural appropriation, while the Skeptok had taken to waving documents that likely meant nothing under the current circumstances. Amidst the chaos, a low-ranked human liaison nervously tried to interject. "Perhaps we should wait for Engineer Vex's report before making any final claims." The suggestion was met with a chorus of dismissive grunts and hisses. The consensus seemed to be that humans were as reliable as a paper umbrella in a meteor shower. Meanwhile, Rylan was elbow-deep in alien tech, trying to make sense of the console's interface. It was like trying to read a book written by a hyperactive child with a fondness for hieroglyphs. "Zip, can you interpret any of this?" he asked, squinting at the display. "Working on it," Zip replied. "The language is complex, but there are traces of patterns similar to other known dialects." Rylan nodded, focusing on the task at hand. Whatever lay buried in this chamber, it was important enough to warrant the interest of half the galaxy. The artifacts above might have been smoke and mirrors, but this was the real deal. As he worked, his mind wandered back to the council, imagining the chaos as empires fought over a mystery they couldn't even begin to comprehend. It was almost poetic in a tragic sort of way. The universe had a dark sense of humor, and Rylan was just along for the ride. Finally, after what felt like an age, Zip's processors pinged with success. "I've managed to translate a portion of the interface. It appears to be a repository of historical and technological data." Rylan's eyes widened. "You mean like a library, of sorts?" "A very, very advanced library." He felt a thrill of excitement, the kind that only came from discovering something that could change everything. This was what he'd signed up for, the chance to uncover secrets that had been lost to time and space. "Think the council will believe us?" Rylan asked, knowing full well the answer. "They are more likely to believe in sentient cheese," Zip replied. Rylan laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. "Well, let's give them something to chew on." He activated the console, the room filling with a soft glow as the data began to unfold before them. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, each piece more tantalizing than the last. Weapons, technology, history, everything an empire could want and more. And here he was, Rylan Vex, humble engineer, standing at the heart of it all. He couldn't help but feel a swell of pride, tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. As they prepared to return to the surface, Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just set off a chain of events that would ripple throughout the galaxy. And yet, for all the uncertainty and danger, he wouldn't have it any other way. "Ready to go show and tell?" he asked Zip, already imagining the reactions this revelation would provoke. "Lead the way," Zip replied, its voice tinged with anticipation. Together they ascended the shaft, the weight of their discovery heavy on their shoulders. The universe was a dangerous place, full of mysteries and wonders, and Rylan was ready to dive headfirst into whatever awaited them next. As they emerged into the sunlight, Rylan took a deep breath, the air tasting sweeter than it had any right to. He glanced at Zip, their shared determination evident in the android's unblinking gaze. The council was waiting, and Rylan was ready to show them just what human ingenuity could do. With a grin, he set off toward the future, uncertain but unafraid. "Let's go make history," he said, his voice full of resolve. And with that, they returned to the ship, the lucky bastard ready to take on the galaxy once more. Rylan Vex emerged from the hidden chamber, carrying the weight of a world-ending revelation and sporting a grin that could only be described as maniacally optimistic. Zip followed close behind, its sensors buzzing with the thrill of newfound data. "Remind me to thank the cosmic lottery for giving us this gem," Rylan said, glancing back at the shaft they'd just climbed. "Nothing like stumbling upon a treasure trove to make a day memorable." "Indeed," Zip replied, its tone drier than a skeptoc's humor. "We are the envy of every treasure hunter with a death wish." Rylan chuckled, dusting off his hands. "Now, if only our esteemed council could appreciate it as much. I give them 5 minutes before they start squabbling again." 5 minutes? You're betting on them showing restraint. Bold move, Zip quipped, its synthetic voice devoid of actual amusement yet somehow still conveying it. The council chamber was still a cacophony of hisses, flaps, and the occasional pew-skinned diplomat banging a holographic fist on the table. It was a lovely testament to intergalactic cooperation, or lack thereof. Inside the chamber, the BVLVNN diplomats' mouth flaps were working overtime, no doubt producing a sound reminiscent of a deflating balloon. "We demand an immediate update on the artifact status." The skeptoc diplomat, unimpressed, pointed a long, wrinkled finger at Rylan. "Perhaps your engineer has forgotten how to speak." Rylan raised his hands in mock surrender as he entered the room, Zip trailing along like a silent sidekick. "Easy there, folks. I'm here, aren't I? Ready to deliver the news, both good and potentially catastrophic." A hush fell over the assembly, a miracle in itself. Rylan was tempted to make a snarky comment about it being quieter than a space whale's conscience, but he decided against it. He'd need all the goodwill he could muster. "We may have found something significant beneath the site," Rylan announced, pacing like a conductor before a particularly unruly orchestra. "Something that might make all our previous squabbles seem as petty as arguing over whose flag gets the highest pole." The Zorbal diplomats collectively hissed, needle teeth glittering like the universe's worst dental nightmare. "Explain." Rylan held up a hand, the universal sign for hold your space horses. "What we've discovered isn't just an artifact. It's a repository of knowledge, technology, history, you name it. It's like finding the universe's lost library." The BVLVNN diplomats' flaps fluttered with interest. "And what is to be done with this discovery?" "Good question," Rylan said, scratching his chin. "Though given our track record, I'd suggest not blowing it up. But that's just me." The skeptoc diplomat leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "And what of the energy readings? We've detected fluctuations that could suggest instability." "Ah, yes. The minor detail of potential doom," Rylan replied with a grin that was entirely too cheerful for the situation. "We're working on that. But imagine the possibilities if we can tap into this without, annihilating ourselves," the Zorbal snorted. "Big if." That's my favorite kind of if, Rylan shot back. The kind where we might not end up space dust. Meanwhile, Zip's processors were whirring quietly, analyzing the data they'd collected, piecing together the remnants of a forgotten civilization. The energy readings are indeed fluctuating, Zip confirmed, but they appear to follow a pattern like a heartbeat. Rylan raised an eyebrow. Or a countdown. The room grew tense, the implications settling over the diplomats like a thick, unpleasant fog. Rylan could almost taste the panic in the air, tinged with the usual burnt rubber scent of the chamber. The human liaison, who had until now been as useful as a chocolate teapot, piped up. Perhaps we should consider a collaborative approach to fully understand and utilize the library. Rylan swallowed a laugh. Right, and next we'll hold hands and sing Kumbaya. The Skeptok diplomat's lips curled into something resembling a smile, though it looked more like a grimace. Engineer Vex, we expect swift results. Fail, and we will find someone more capable. Rylan nodded, the threat as familiar as a leaky faucet. Understood. I'm on it like a parasite on a politician. As the council resumed its shouting, Rylan turned to Zip. Guess we have our marching orders. Find the source of those readings before we all end up with our atoms scattered across the galaxy. An admirable goal, Zip replied. I shall prepare the data for deeper analysis. Rylan sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like an ill-fitting helmet. He loved a good mystery, sure, but this one came with stakes higher than he'd ever imagined. Back at Site Theta 12, the ruins stretched out before them, a graveyard of forgotten dreams and broken promises. Rylan scanned the landscape with a critical eye, searching for anything they might have missed. Let's hope we're not chasing shadows, he muttered, half to himself, half to Zip. Or ghosts, Zip added, its sensors attuned to every nuance in the site's energy field. They moved through the rubble, each step a reminder of the history buried beneath. Rylan couldn't help but wonder how many civilizations had risen and fallen on the back of technologies they didn't fully understand. It was a sobering thought, one that made him appreciate the fragility of their position. Got any bright ideas? Rylan asked, stopping at a particularly unremarkable pile of debris. Perhaps we should focus on the pattern, Zip suggested. If the energy fluctuations are indeed a countdown, they could be leading us to the source. Rylan nodded, like following a trail of breadcrumbs. Only these won't lead us to a witch's cottage. Hopefully. They continued their search, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the ruins. Rylan felt the familiar thrill of discovery tinged with the cold edge of fear. There was no safety net here, no guarantee that he'd come out the other side in one piece. Hope we're not biting off more than we can chew, Rylan said as they approached a section of the ruins that seemed to pulse with a latent energy. Optimism, Rylan? Zip asked, its tone nearly teasing. More like realistic pessimism, Rylan replied. Expect the worst, hope for the best, and be pleasantly surprised if the universe doesn't try to kill you. They reached a small, inconspicuous structure nestled among the ruins. It looked as if it had been overlooked by time, a forgotten footnote in the grand narrative of history. But the energy reading spiked here, a promising, if ominous, sign. Looks like we've found our jackpot, Rylan said, crouching to examine the entrance. Or a very elaborate trap. Only one way to find out, Zip said, echoing Rylan's own thoughts. They entered the structure, the air cool and charged with potential. Rylan's heart beat a little faster, a mix of excitement and trepidation. The walls were lined with more of the intricate circuitry they'd seen before, each line humming with a promise or a threat. It was hard to tell. Keep an eye out for anything that might resemble a control panel, Rylan instructed, his flashlight cutting through the dimness. Understood, Zip replied, its sensors sweeping the room with meticulous precision. As they moved deeper into the structure, Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was an irrational fear, he knew, but the mind had a way of conjuring ghosts when reality grew too quiet. Zip, you picking up any life signs? Rylan asked, not entirely joking. None that match known biological patterns, Zip replied. But the energy signature is growing stronger. Comforting, Rylan muttered, trying to ignore the goosebumps on his arms. They turned a corner and found themselves in front of a large, imposing console. It was similar to the one they'd seen before, but larger, more complex. Rylan approached it with a mix of awe and apprehension. "This looks like the mother of all control panels," he said, eyeing the myriad of buttons, dials, and glowing symbols. "Indeed," Zip agreed. "It might be the central hub for the entire site." Rylan reached out, his fingers hovering over the console. "Let's see if we can make sense of this." "Proceed with caution," Zip warned. "We still don't know the full extent of its capabilities." Rylan nodded, taking a deep breath. His fingers moved over the console with a practiced ease, each touch eliciting a response from the system. The room filled with a low hum, as if the structure itself were waking from a long slumber. "Looks like we're getting somewhere," Rylan said, a hint of pride in his voice. The console's display came to life, a cascade of symbols and equations that seemed to pulse in time with the energy readings. Rylan focused, his mind racing to decipher their meaning. "Zip, any luck with translation?" he asked, eyes scanning the display. "I'm working on it," Zip replied. "The language is complex, but there are similarities to known dialects." Rylan nodded, his attention divided between the console and the encroaching sense of urgency. Whatever this system was, it held the key to understanding the site's power and possibly averting disaster. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The energy fluctuations were growing more intense, the console's heartbeat quickening like a countdown to an unknown fate. "Come on," Rylan muttered, willing the system to reveal its secrets. "Show us what you've got." Finally, the symbols coalesced into a coherent pattern, a map of the site's inner workings. Rylan studied it, his eyes widening as he realized the scope of what they'd uncovered. "This isn't just a repository," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "It's a network, a living system." "A network?" Zip echoed, its processors whirring with the implications. "Yeah," Rylan confirmed, his mind racing. "Like a web connecting parts of the site, and it's all centered around this console." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They weren't dealing with a simple artifact or a dormant library. This was something far greater, a system that could change the balance of power across the galaxy. "Rylan, the energy fluctuations are reaching critical levels," Zip warned, its sensors flashing with urgency. Rylan cursed, his mind racing to find a solution. They'd opened Pandora's box, and now it was up to them to prevent it from unleashing chaos. Okay, he said, trying to calm the rising tide of panic. "We need to stabilize the system. Maybe if we can synchronize the energy flow, we can buy ourselves some time." "Rylan, I suggest caution," Zip advised. "Interfering with the system could have unforeseen consequences." "Consequences are better than getting vaporized," Rylan shot back, his mind already formulating a plan. "We need to patch into the network, redistribute the load." A sudden surge of energy cut him off, the room vibrating with a force that sent him stumbling backward. The console flickered, its symbols blurring as the system threatened to spiral out of control. "Rylan," Zip called, its voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm fine," Rylan shouted, regaining his balance. "But we need to act fast." With renewed determination, he approached the console, his hands moving with precision. It was a gamble, a desperate bid to wrestle control from a system that had been dormant for millennia. The energy reading spiked, the room thrumming with a power that defied comprehension. Rylan focused, his mind and body in sync as he navigated the console's labyrinthine interface. "Come on," he muttered, willing the system to respond. "Work with me here." The console's display shifted, the symbols aligning into a coherent stream of data. Rylan's heart raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through his veins. "Rylan, the system is stabilizing," Zip reported, its sensors attuned to the site's energy field. Rylan exhaled, relief flooding through him. They'd bought themselves time, a precious commodity in a universe that seldom offered second chances. "Looks like we're not toast just yet," he said, a grin spreading across his face. But even as he celebrated their small victory, Rylan knew that they were far from safe. The system was a beast, and they'd only just begun to tame it. The Council's demands, the site's secrets, the looming threat of disaster, it all loomed over them like a sword hanging by the thinnest of threads. But Rylan was ready, determined to see this through to the end. "Let's get back to work," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "We've got a network to unravel, and a galaxy to keep in one piece." Together, they delved into the system, the future uncertain but filled with possibility. In the grand tapestry of the cosmos, they were but the council chamber. An interstellar cacophony of bickering and posturing was in full swing when Rylan Vex strutted in like a man whose prize poodle had just taken best in show. He sauntered across the room, datapad tucked under his arm, a grin wide enough to drive a starship through on his face. It was the kind of grin that made the BVLVNN diplomat, who was in the middle of producing a noise that could only be described as a deflating balloon, pause mid-deflate. "Rylan Vex," the diplomat wheezed, its voice as dry as a vacuum. "What news of the artifact?" "News? Oh, just a little something about it being a network that could obliterate half the galaxy," Rylan replied, his tone as nonchalant as if he were discussing the weather. "No big deal." The skeptoc diplomat, who looked like a disgruntled librarian eternally judging your book choices, pointed a spindly finger at Rylan. "Is he even capable of coherent speech?" it asked, as if doubting the very nature of human linguistics. "Hey, I'll have you know I scored high marks in advanced sarcasm," Rylan shot back, waving his datapad like a diploma. Zip, his ever-loyal robotic sidekick, buzzed with data, providing a soundtrack to Rylan's swagger. "Rylan, perhaps we should focus on the pattern you've discovered," it prompted, its tone hovering somewhere between encouragement and exasperation. Right, Rylan said, clearing his throat. "So, turns out, the energy emissions from the artifact are not just random spikes, it's more like a cosmic Morse code. And if my calculations are correct, which, let's be real, they always are, we're talking about some sort of message or maybe a countdown." "A countdown to what?" the puce-skinned diplomat demanded, its holographic fist clenched with invisible rage. "That's the million-credit question, isn't it?" Rylan replied, his eyes twinkling with the kind of mischief that usually led to bar brawls or accidental revolutions. "Could be an ancient alien party invitation, or an intergalactic self-destruct sequence. Who knows?" The Zorbal diplomats, their needle teeth on full display, hissed in unison. "Humans and their flippant attitudes," one of them sneered, looking like it wanted to chew on Rylan's optimism like a particularly tough piece of gristle. "Hey, laughter in the face of danger is a human specialty," Rylan quipped. "Or maybe that's just a side effect of always being on the brink of disaster." As the council members continued their squabbling, each trying to outdo the others in a contest of blame-shifting and finger-pointing, Rylan's mind was already racing ahead. The artifact's countdown, if that's what it was, could spell doom or deliver salvation. But first, they'd have to understand its purpose. The room's technology, already a hodgepodge of intergalactic cultures, began to flicker ominously. Lights dimmed, communications stuttered, and a few screens displayed what looked suspiciously like cat videos, an inexplicable phenomenon given the universal ban on feline content after the Great Kitten Cascade of 2147. "Not to alarm anyone," Rylan said, gesturing to the glitching tech, "but it seems like our little artifact here has a few opinions about council meetings." "Unacceptable," the BVLVNN diplomat squawked, its composure unraveling like a poorly woven sweater. "This is a breach of security. Relax, it's just your usual apocalyptic artifact malfunction," Rylan assured, still grinning like a devil with a new trick. "Probably wants to remind us who's really in charge." The skeptoc diplomat leaned in, its gaze narrowing. You appear far too amused for someone neck-deep in potential annihilation. That's the secret, friend, Rylan replied with a wink. You either laugh or you sob, and sobbing makes my nose run. With the room descending into chaos, Rylan leaned over to Zip. Think you can keep this tech from frying everyone's circuits? I'm already on it, Zip replied, its sensors whirring with purpose. But securing this system will require, let me guess, caution, Rylan interrupted, a wry smile on his lips. Yeah, I'm not big on that. Let's aim for just enough chaos to keep it interesting. As the lights continued their erratic dance, Rylan noticed a pattern, not in the energy emissions but in the room's own disruptions. A pattern mirroring the artifact's energy signature. His mind clicked into place like a well-timed punchline. Zip, these malfunctions, it's the artifact's way of communicating. A distress signal, perhaps, Rylan mused aloud, his voice barely audible over the chorus of diplomatic outrage. If your theory holds, Zip said, then our artifact might not simply be a weapon, but a beacon. A beacon calling for help or heralding destruction, Rylan replied, scratching at his chin as if expecting wisdom to sprout from his stubble. Lovely, just what the universe needs, a cosmic cry for attention. The pew-skinned diplomat's holographic fist pounded into an equally holographic table. Vex, this is no time for philosophical musings. We demand action. Philosophy? Nah, that's for people with time to waste, Rylan retorted. I'm more of a wing-it-and-pray kinda guy. But even as he bantered, the reality of their situation pressed down like an overzealous gravity field. If the artifact was indeed a beacon, what, or who, was it signaling? The council's voices rose into a crescendo of bureaucratic panic, each diplomat trying to outshout the others in a symphony of fear and defiance. And through it all, Rylan stood at the center, the eye of the storm, his mind whirring with possibilities. All right, folks, he shouted over the din. We've got a potential universe-ending scenario on our hands, and I say we handle it like true intergalactic citizens, with a complete lack of common sense and a dash of reckless optimism. His words, surprisingly, seemed to cut through the chaos, if only because they were absurd enough to be memorable. The diplomats fell silent, their collective gaze fixed on Rylan with a mixture of exasperation and reluctant hope. Here's the plan, he continued, gesturing wildly as if sketching it out in the air. Zip and I will dive deeper into this artifact's signals, try to decode its message. Meanwhile, you lot can. Well, you can keep yelling at each other if it makes you feel better. Rylan, Zip interjected, this is highly irregular. We should consider. No time for proper procedure, Zip, Rylan interrupted, the adrenaline of impending doom making him bolder than ever. Let's embrace the chaos and see where it takes us. With that, he turned on his heel, making for the chamber's exit with Zip buzzing in tow. Behind them, the council resumed its squabble, the diplomats' voices fading into the background hum of bureaucratic dysfunction. As they left the chamber, Rylan's mind raced with the enormity of the problem ahead. It wasn't just about decoding an alien signal. It was about preventing a catastrophe, or maybe redirecting it. Think we can figure this out? Rylan asked, his bravado tempered by a flicker of doubt. Probability of success is within acceptable parameters, Zip replied, which was as close as the little bot got to optimism. I'll take that as a maybe, Rylan said, his grin returning despite the odds stacked higher than a space whale's lunch bill. Back at Site Theta 12, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ruins and highlighting the scale of what lay before them. The hidden chamber, with its secrets and threats, loomed like a riddle wrapped in a puzzle encased in a mystery. Here's hoping we don't blow ourselves up, Rylan muttered as they approached the artifact's control console once more. Your penchant for worst-case scenarios is noted, Zip replied, its sensors already scanning for anomalies. Good all-realistic pessimism, Rylan said, his hands hovering over the console's interface. After all, if you expect the universe to screw you over, you're never disappointed. With a deep breath, Rylan delved into the system's intricacies, each keystroke a step into the unknown. The console's symbols washed over him, their alien logic a labyrinth he was determined to conquer. "Come on, you enigmatic piece of junk," he whispered to the console. "Show me what you're hiding." As he worked, the room pulsed with the familiar hum of energy, a reminder of the stakes at hand. They were standing at the edge of a precipice, peering into the abyss and hoping it didn't stare back. "Rylan," Zip interrupted, its voice cutting through the concentration. "The energy pattern is stabilizing. Whatever you're doing, it's working." "Yeah, but for how long?" Rylan replied, his focus never wavering. "This could be our one shot at understanding this thing." The console's display shifted, revealing new layers of data, each more complex than the last. But within the chaos, a pattern emerged, an intricate dance of signals and responses, a communication both ancient and urgent. "This is it," Rylan said, his voice a mixture of awe and determination. "We cracked this code and we might just save the galaxy." With Zip's help, he dove deeper, navigating the alien system with a mix of intuition and sheer stubbornness. The console's secrets unfolded before them, a tapestry of knowledge and power waiting to be deciphered. And as the darkness closed in around them, Rylan couldn't help but feel a thrill of possibility. They were on the brink of something monumental, a revelation that could reshape the universe, or end it in a spectacular blaze of glory. "Let's hope the universe is in a forgiving mood," he said, his grin widening as he pushed forward, determined to wrestle meaning from the void. In the end, it was a gamble, a wager against fate, with the stakes higher than ever. But if there was one thing Rylan Vex excelled at, it was beating the odds and laughing in the face of danger. And as the night stretched on, filled with data and determination, he knew they were closer than ever to unlocking the artifact's secrets and securing their place in a galaxy that never ceased to surprise them. The council chamber, a swirling vortex of miscommunication and bad decisions, was as welcoming as a black hole. Rylan stood at the center, arms crossed, trying not to look like he was preparing for his own execution, though with the diplomatic crowd assembled, he'd seen friendlier firing squads. "Vex, your actions are reckless," the Skeptok diplomat barked, sounding like it had just found an overdue library book. "If we leave this situation in your hands, the artifact could obliterate us all." "Obliterate, eh?" Rylan said, raising an eyebrow. "That's only because I haven't found the hug button yet." The pew-skinned diplomat sneered, holographic fist at the ready. "This is no time for jokes, Vex. We've decided to take command of the operation. You are officially sidelined." "Yeah, 'cause sidelining the guy who just started making sense of this mess is a stellar idea," Rylan retorted, sarcasm dripping as heavily as a leaky airlock. "But by all means, continue with your flawless planning. I'm sure the universe will just roll over and cooperate." Rylan glanced at Zip, who hovered silently by his side. "You hear that, pal? We're out of the game. Guess we'll have to leave the galaxy saving to the professionals." Zip's sensors pulsed with what could only be described as electronic skepticism. "The probability of the Council's success without our intervention is—" "Don't ruin the suspense," Rylan interrupted. "Let them figure it out when the big kaboom happens." With a dramatic sigh, he turned away from the council, resisting the urge to show them a different kind of universal gesture. The diplomats resumed their squabbling, a chorus of egos clashing louder than a fleet of malfunctioning starships. Rylan made his way out of the chamber, shoulders slumped. Sure, he'd been in tight spots before, but this felt different. This was a losing hand with an ante of galactic proportions. He needed a miracle, or failing that, a really good distraction. Once outside, he paused, taking in the view of Site Theta 12. The ancient structures loomed like inscrutable judges, their secrets buried under dust and time. "Well, Zip, it's just you and me now," Rylan said, running a hand through his hair. "Guess it's time to do what we do best. Abandon all hope," Zip suggested, sensors buzzing with faux innocence. "Close enough." Rylan grinned, though the expression didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let's poke the bear and see if it growls." He made his way to the hidden chamber, leaving the council's cacophony and his own doubts behind. It was time to get back to the real problem, deciphering the artifact's message before the council decided to bulldoze the whole site and declare victory. Inside the chamber, the artifact sat like a cosmic puzzle, defying explanation and daring anyone to try. Rylan approached it, feeling the hum of its energy in his bones. It was like standing in the presence of an ancient god, one with a remarkably dark sense of humor. "All right, you enigmatic piece of alien craftsmanship," Rylan muttered. "Let's figure out what's got your circuits in a twist." He set to work, fingers dancing across the console, weaving through symbols and data like a particularly determined spider. Zip hovered nearby, its sensors capturing every move, every flicker of change. "Rylan, are you certain this is wise?" Zip asked, its voice a blend of caution and curiosity. "Since when do we do wise?" Rylan quipped, eyes glued to the console. "We're more of a leap first, look later kind of team." The console responded, shifting data into patterns that hinted at meaning without ever revealing it outright. Rylan focused, driven by equal parts desperation and the thrill of the chase. Outside, the sun set, casting the room into shadow. It was just him and the artifact now, locked in a silent battle of wills. With each passing minute, Rylan felt the weight of the council's decision pressing on him, an invisible clock counting down to disaster. "If I don't crack this, they might just blow it all up," he said, more to himself than to Zip. "And I can't let those bureaucrats have the last laugh." "Then perhaps you should." Yeah, concentrate," Rylan finished for Zip, eyes narrowing in determination. "Sometimes I think you enjoy pointing out my shortcomings." "Only because you make it so easy," Zip shot back, the cheekiness in its tone unmistakable. Rylan smirked despite himself, digging deeper into the alien code. He worked with an intensity that bordered on manic, each discovery a small victory in a war he wasn't sure he could win. Hours slipped by, unnoticed. The console's symbols danced a mocking jig, offering hints and revelations in equal measure. Rylan's mind buzzed with possibilities, each new avenue a potential key to understanding, or a dead end. "Got anything yet?" Zip inquired, its sensors a blur of activity. "Just a few breadcrumbs," Rylan admitted, "but enough to keep me going. This thing's like a cosmic Rubik's Cube designed by a sadist." "Your metaphors are as colorful as ever," Zip observed, admiration, or was it sarcasm, in its tone. "Better than dull, right?" Rylan replied, cracking his knuckles. "Now let's see if we can't turn breadcrumbs into a full-course meal." He dove back in, his fingers dancing with renewed purpose. The room's energy pulsed in time with his thoughts, a rhythmic reminder of what was at stake. As the hours dragged on, exhaustion began to creep in, clinging to him like an annoying relative. Rylan shook it off, driven by a stubborn refusal to let the council be right. "Rylan," Zip said, its voice a gentle intrusion. "It's been hours, perhaps a rest would." "No time for naps, Zip," Rylan interrupted, eyes locked on the data. "Not when we're this close." And then, like a bolt from the blue, it happened. A breakthrough, a pattern emerging from the chaos, a message writ large across the screen. It was a revelation, a glimpse into the artifact's true nature. "Zip, look," Rylan exclaimed, energy renewed. "I think we've got something." "Amazing," Zip replied, its sensors flickering with excitement. "What does it mean?" "Not sure yet," Rylan said, studying the new data. "But it's a start, a big one. We might just have a fighting chance after all." The thrill of discovery surged through him, banishing the fatigue if only for a moment. Here, in the silent shadows of the chamber, Rylan Vex felt the universe shift, a door creaking open to possibilities undreamed of. And as the night stretched on, filled with promise and peril, he knew they were standing on the precipice of something extraordinary. The council might have lost faith, but he hadn't, not in himself, and not in the endless potential of the human spirit. "Let's crack this code, Zip," Rylan said, determination lighting up his face like a supernova. "Before those diplomats can get their grubby hands on it." The little bot buzzed in agreement, ready to tackle the challenge head-on. And so they worked, side by side, two unlikely heroes in a galaxy full of chaos. In the depths of Site Theta 12, they fought to unlock the secrets of an alien artifact, racing against time and the specter of impending doom. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, a human and a machine, bound by hope, humor, and the belief that even in the darkest of hours they could find a way to save the day. As they continued their work, Rylan couldn't help but chuckle. You know, Zip, there's a saying on Earth, when you've hit rock bottom, the only way is up. Optimistic given our current situation, Zip observed. Maybe, Rylan conceded. But it's all we've got. And besides, if this is rock bottom, I can't wait to see the view from the top. With that, they plunged back into the data, ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. Rylan Vex rubbed his eyes, wondering if he'd ever had less sleep and more pressure in his life. He leaned over the console, its light casting eerie shadows across his face. The alien symbols on the screen flickered at him like a cosmic joke he wasn't in on. Or maybe it was a cruel riddle and the punchline was extinction. Zip, I have a theory, Rylan announced, more to keep himself awake than anything. What if this artifact isn't a weapon but a defense system, like a cosmic version of Beware of Dog? Zip hovered closer, its sensors buzzing with what might be interest or mocking incredulity. You believe these remnants could be a non-aggressive mechanism? Well, it's either that or it's counting down to the galaxy's biggest fireworks show. And I'm not keen on being fireworks. Rylan leaned back, his chair creaking in protest. Think about it. Why would ancient aliens leave a doomsday device lying around? Maybe they were more into protecting themselves than blowing others up. An optimistic hypothesis, Zip noted. Though optimism in our situation seems like a luxury, Rylan snorted. Yeah, well, desperation does funny things to a guy's brain, and I'd rather try optimism than wait for the council to accidentally push the big red button. He glanced at the array of alien technology strewn across the room, each piece humming with potential, or maybe danger. Like a kid in a candy store, except the candy might explode. Let's start piecing this thing together, Rylan said, cracking his knuckles. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. Only the pieces might kill us. They worked together, man and machine, assembling what they hoped was more cosmic shield than universal nuke. The hours ticked by, each one a reminder of the Council's impatience and the looming threat of annihilation. Rylan could almost hear the Council's collective foot-tapping from here. They'd probably already written him off as a madman tinkering with forces beyond his understanding, and maybe they were right, but that had never stopped him before. Got a screwdriver, Zip? Rylan asked, holding out his hand. Or whatever passes for one in this tech trap. Zip extended a tool, its mechanical precision a stark contrast to Rylan's more haphazard approach. But together they managed to make it work, like a duet of chaos and order. Think the Council will buy it? Rylan wondered aloud, connecting two wires that hissed ominously before settling into a steady pulse. The Council's decision-making process is, shall we say, erratic, Zip replied, its sensors reflecting a light show of data. However, presenting a less apocalyptic interpretation of the artifact may sway their opinion. Right, because less apocalyptic is a great selling point, Rylan muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Still beats oops, we vaporized a star system. They continued assembling, contriving a device that, if Rylan's hunch was correct, would emit a protective energy field rather than a destructive wave. A gamble, sure, but gambling had gotten him this far. Time to let the Council in on the fun, Rylan declared, stepping back to admire their handiwork. After all, what's the point in saving the galaxy if no one's around to pat you on the back, or blame you for failure? Zip added helpfully. Yeah, that too. With their creation in tow, they made their way back to the Council chamber. The path was lined with the kind of tension that could only come from knowing you might soon be arguing with people who believed they had the universe figured out. The chamber loomed ahead, its entrance like the gaping maw of some bureaucratic beast. Rylan took a deep breath. Showtime, Zip. Inside, the usual suspects were back at it, debating the best way to bungle things up. The BVLVNN diplomat was producing noises that sounded like a bagpipe being tortured, while the Zorbal diplomats flashed their needle teeth in what Rylan hoped was an attempt at a smile. "Ah, Vex returns," the Skeptok diplomat sneered, apparently allergic to joy. "Have you come to concede your folly? Folly." "No, I'm here to deliver some good news, for a change," Rylan shot back, planting his feet firmly on the ground. "Turns out your doomsday device might be more of a universal security blanket." The room fell silent, every eye, alien and otherwise, fixed on him. Rylan resisted the urge to grin like a madman. Instead, he raised the device like a prize-winning fish. "This little beauty," he continued, "could activate a defense mechanism protecting us rather than blowing us to bits." "Preposterous," the puce-skinned diplomat scoffed, its holographic fist flickering. "How do you propose proving such a wild theory?" Rylan shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "Let me plug it in and see if we all live to tell the tale." Zip hovered beside him, unwavering. "Our data supports Rylan's hypothesis. While unconfirmed, it suggests a non-lethal activation." The room buzzed with a mix of skepticism and reluctant curiosity. Rylan knew he'd have to sell it, hard. "Listen, folks. You can sit here arguing semantics until our sun goes supernova, or you can give me a shot. Worst case, we're no worse off than your current plan of wait and hope." Murmurs rippled through the council like a wave of uncertainty. Rylan could see it, their fear of taking a chance against their fear of doing nothing. It was the kind of cosmic gamble he thrived on. Finally, the Skeptok diplomat sighed, exasperation etched into every wrinkle. "Very well, Vex, proceed. But know that your head will be the first on the chopping block should this fail." "Wouldn't want it any other way," Rylan replied, his grin now firmly in place. He approached the artifact, the device in hand. It was a moment of truth, or more accurately, a moment of please don't blow up. With a deep breath, Rylan connected the device, feeling the hum of energy resonate through his bones. The artifact pulsed, the room's lights flickering in response. Rylan's heart pounded in sync, each beat a reminder of the stakes. And then, slowly, a field of shimmering light began to unfold around the artifact, bathing the chamber in a glow that was both otherworldly and comforting. It was like being wrapped in a cocoon of cosmic warmth. Rylan dared a glance at the council. Some looked relieved, others like they still expected the room to implode, but no one moved to stop him. "Well, look at that," Rylan said, trying to sound casual despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Not a bad first step, huh?" The BVLVNN diplomat made a noise not unlike a deflating party balloon, possibly its version of applause. The Zorbal diplomats exchanged glances, their needle teeth bared in what might be acceptance. "Rylan Vex," the puce-skinned Skeptok began, begrudging respect creeping into its tone, "it seems you have mitigated immediate disaster. Coming from you, that's practically a love letter," Rylan quipped, feeling the tension ease just a fraction. The chamber buzzed with muted relief, the ghosts of catastrophe slowly retreating. But Rylan knew they weren't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot. They'd made progress, sure, but the full implications of the artifact were still a mystery. "We need to understand more," Rylan said, addressing the room. "This is just the beginning. We've got the defense up, but what if there's more? A message, an instruction manual, who knows?" "Indeed," the Skeptok replied, its skepticism not entirely vanished. "Further study is imperative. However, your hypothesis has bought us time, a valuable commodity." Rylan nodded, feeling the weight of their still tenuous safety nestling uncomfortably on his shoulders. "Time to keep digging, then. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that every answer leads to more questions. And every question leads to further complications," the Zorbal diplomat added, its voice like knives on granite. Rylan chuckled, feeling a camaraderie born of shared survival. "Ain't that the truth?" With that, Rylan and Zip withdrew from the chamber, the council's cautious approval a small victory in a much larger war. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder of all that remained to be discovered, and all that remained at risk. Well, Zip, Ryland said as they moved away from the council's watchful eyes, we did something today. Not sure what exactly, but something. Your persistence paid off, Zip observed, its sensors keenly attuned to their surroundings. Yeah, guess I was due a win. Ryland glanced back at the chamber, a place that felt more like a battleground than a meeting room. But we're not finished, not by a long shot. Your eloquence is matched only by your stubbornness, Zip remarked, a hint of amusement in its mechanical tone. Compliments will get you nowhere, Zip, except maybe an oil bath. Together, they made their way back to the hidden chamber. There was more to uncover, more to understand, and still that ever-present threat of the unknown. But for now, they had a breather, a moment to regroup and plan their next move. As they walked, Ryland couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe they were just two small cogs in the vast machinery of the galaxy, but they were cogs that had refused to quit, refused to let the gears grind them into oblivion. And as long as they kept moving, kept pushing, who knew what they might achieve? The universe was a vast and dangerous place, but it was theirs to save, or screw up. Zip, Ryland said, looking up at the stars with a wry smile, I think I'm starting to understand why people say hope's a double-edged sword. Because it can inspire great achievements or lead to spectacular failures, Zip asked, ever the pragmatic companion. Exactly, but you know what? I'll take it. Beats the alternative. With renewed determination, the duo stepped into the hidden chamber, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. They were a team, a mismatched pair of heroes in a galaxy that seemed hell-bent on making things difficult. And somehow, in the midst of all the chaos and uncertainty, that felt like enough. For now, at least. Ryland Vex stood back from the alien console, his latest contraption whirring with potential energy. All right, Zip, he said, cracking his knuckles. Moment of truth. Think this thing is more sword or shield? Zip hovered nearby, its mechanical sensors twitching like an overcaffeinated insect. Given your previous track record, Ryland, I'd guess it's a coin toss between genius and catastrophe. Ryland chuckled, shaking his head. That's the spirit, Zip. Always got my back, or preparing to pick up the pieces of it. The council chamber loomed behind them, filled with a smattering of diplomats who, by Ryland's estimation, would be more useful as paperweights. The BVLVNN diplomat emitted another mournful wheeze, the sound reminiscent of a dying accordion. Ryland Vex, the puce-skinned Skeptok diplomat announced with the enthusiasm of a man going to the gallows. Have you averted our doom or just delayed it? Ryland turned, his grin somewhere between cocky and crazed. Guess we're about to find out. But if I were a betting man, and I am, I'd say it's a good day to not vaporize a planet. He glanced at the odd assortment of alien tech they'd cobbled together, a mess of blinking lights and humming circuits that looked more at home in a space junkyard than a council chamber. Let's see if this bad boy can keep us breathing past lunchtime. Just as he was about to trigger the device, alarms blared throughout the chamber, a cacophony of klaxons and wailing sirens. Because, naturally, things were about to get worse before they got better. Incoming threat detected, Zip announced, cheerfully unperturbed. Source unknown, but it's fast and it's mean. Of course it is, Ryland muttered, shooting a glance at the gathered diplomats who'd gone from skeptical to nervous faster than a politician at a press conference. The Zorbal diplomats were practically gnashing their needle teeth, their usual smirks replaced by something akin to panic. What is this threat? One hissed, its voice like sandpaper on glass. Ryland shrugged, a gesture that was equal parts easygoing and exasperated. No idea, but guessing it's not here for tea and biscuits. Outside, the sky darkened as if the universe decided to pull a cosmic curtain. Whatever was coming, it was big enough to blot out stars and significant enough to have every sensor Zip had on red alert. Time to test the theory, Ryland announced, more to himself than anyone else. He stabbed a button with nothing but hope and bravado backing him up. The artifact flared to life, the makeshift device humming with purpose. It was the kind of sound that suggested it knew what it was doing, even if Rylan didn't. A shimmering field began to expand from the console, enveloping the chamber in a protective cocoon. "Hey, look at that," Rylan said, more impressed than he'd ever admit. Not bad for a couple of guys winging it. The Skeptok diplomat's holographic fist flickered with a mix of relief and disbelief. "You might have actually saved us, Vex." "Don't sound so surprised," Rylan shot back. "I've been known to succeed, occasionally." Above them, the threat closed in, a massive ship with weapons that glowed ominously, its intent as clear as the frustration on the diplomats' faces. But as it unleashed a barrage of energy toward the chamber, the protective field absorbed the attack, dissipating it harmlessly into sparkles of light. The BVLVNN diplomat squeaked like a party favor, its anxiety giving way to something resembling approval. The Zorbal diplomats exchanged looks, their previous contempt replaced with something like respect. "See," Rylan said, feeling a bit smug. "We're not space dust, yet." Zip hovered closer, its mechanical tone carrying a hint of admiration. "Your gamble has paid off, Rylan." "Yeah," Rylan replied, still riding the adrenaline of not being obliterated. "Guess there's some method to my madness." He looked back at the assembled aliens, who, for the first time, seemed more allies than adversaries. The Skeptok diplomat nodded, its holographic fist now a symbol of reluctant respect. "Your ingenuity has indeed averted disaster, for now." "Well, don't put me on a stamp just yet," Rylan said, the grin never leaving his face. "We've still got to figure out what set that ship on us in the first place." The council chamber began to pulse with a strange energy, the artifact network's influence spreading beyond mere defense. It was as if the ancient tech had been waiting for the right moment to reveal its full capabilities. "Detecting new emissions from the artifact," Zip announced, its sensors buzzing like a caffeinated hornet. "Patterns suggest communication rather than aggression." "Communication," Rylan mused, intrigued. "Maybe it's trying to tell us something important, like stop poking me with sticks or press this button for fireworks." The diplomats seemed to grasp the significance, their initial skepticism evaporating in the face of an emerging understanding. The Skeptok diplomat leaned forward, its usually dour expression now replaced by something approaching curiosity. "What is it saying?" "Oh, come on," Rylan replied, hands raised in mock surrender. "I'm not a universal translator. I just tinker with things until they stop trying to kill us." Zip interjected, its tone ever practical. "It may be a message left by the ancient builders." "A warning, perhaps, or an invitation." "A warning sounds about right," Rylan said, glancing up at the ceiling. "Given our track record, it's probably saying, 'Congratulations, you've unleashed the apocalypse.'" The BVLVNN diplomat emitted another balloon-like sound, its version of laughter. The Zorbal diplomats seemed amused, their needle teeth gleaming. Rylan turned back to the artifact, a sense of determination settling over him. "Whatever it is, we've got to decode it. Could be the key to understanding this whole mess." The artifact continued its cosmic Morse code, the patterns complex and mesmerizing. Each pulse seemed to resonate with the chamber itself, as if the ancient tech were alive, aware. "It's beautiful," one of the Zorbal diplomats remarked, its voice a mix of awe and wonder. "Yeah," Rylan said, captivated despite himself. "Like watching a star being born or a really pretty explosion." "We must decipher it," the Skeptok diplomat insisted, its tone more collaborative than Rylan had ever heard it. "This could change everything." Rylan nodded, feeling the weight of their expectations. "All right, let's crack this code. But remember, it's not the destination, it's the terrifying journey." Zip's sensors focused on the artifact, processing its emissions with the kind of precision only a machine could muster. "Initiating analysis. This may take some time." "Time's what we've bought," Rylan replied, more focused than he'd been in days. "Let's make sure it's worth the investment." The artifact network's glow intensified, casting the chamber in a warm, golden light. It was as if the ancient technology were offering a sign of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light could still find a way through. Rylan took a deep breath, his mind racing with possibilities. For the first time, the council chamber didn't feel like a place of conflict, but of potential. "Here we go," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "The real adventure begins now." Zip floated beside him, a silent partner in the unfolding mystery. Together, they faced the unknown, ready to uncover the secrets of an ancient civilization, and perhaps save the galaxy in the process. "Think we'll find what we're looking for?" Rylan asked, eyes locked on the artifact. "With you, Rylan, anything is possible," Zip replied, its sensors glinting with confidence. Rylan grinned, feeling a rare sense of optimism. "Let's hope the universe agrees." In the midst of uncertainty, the council chamber buzzed with a new energy, a blend of fear, hope, and the thrill of discovery. They were no longer just surviving. They were setting the stage for something greater. As Rylan and Zip delved into the artifact's secrets, the galaxy seemed a little less daunting, its mysteries a bit more manageable. They had come a long way, but the journey was far from over, and somehow, in the grand scheme of things, that felt just right. With renewed focus, Rylan and Zip joined forces with the Council, united in purpose if not entirely in trust. Together, they would peel back the layers of the ancient technology, unraveling its mysteries one pulse at a time. Because in a universe as vast and unforgiving as theirs, the only way forward was through the darkness, guided by the flicker of hope and the stubbornness to see things through to the end. "All right, Zip," Rylan said, his eyes never leaving the artifact. "Let's see what our ancient pen pals have to say." With that, they plunged into the depths of the unknown, ready to face whatever lay beyond the next horizon. For Rylan Vex, it was just another day at the office. As the dust settled in the council chamber, Rylan Vex took a moment to revel in the fact that he was still breathing. Breathing and, more importantly, not smeared across the floor in a fine mist. It had been touch and go there for a second, but against all odds his contraption had worked. A shield and not a sword. Who'd have thought? "Looks like we've earned ourselves a reprieve," Rylan said, wiping the sweat from his brow with the casualness of a man who wasn't entirely sure if his legs would support him. "And possibly a stiff drink." The Skeptok diplomat, still flickering holographically like a particularly jaundiced ghost, gave him a curt nod. "You've shown unexpected resourcefulness, Vex. Humanity might just surprise us yet." "Surprise is one way to put it," Rylan replied, leaning against the console with the kind of casual confidence you could only fake. "Miracle's another." Zip, his mechanical companion, hovered nearby, its sensors still whirring like a fan on its last legs. "Rylan, it seems your reputation as a reckless genius is no longer up for debate." "Thanks, Zip," Rylan said, offering a sardonic salute. "Always nice when your own robot questions your sanity." The Zorbal diplomats, known for their tendency to bare needle teeth like it was going out of style, exchanged looks that suggested they'd just been informed their least favorite food was now a delicacy. Maybe humans weren't just hairless apes with a penchant for getting their limbs stuck in alien machinery after all. Perhaps, one of them said, its voice laced